Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Delivering Modern IBMI Business Apps with Profound UI version 6. Today we're excited to have two great speakers with us. We have, well known to most of you, Scott Klement, who is our Director of Product Development and Support here at Profound Logic. And we also have Matt Denninghoff, who is a product developer here at Profound Logic Software. Now before we get started, I wanted to cover a few items of housekeeping. Just to let you know, today's webinar is being recorded, and after the webinar, we will send you a follow-up email when that recording is available. It usually takes a day or so. And then we also have a presentation handout available. If you look in the GoToWebinar interface over on the right-hand side under the handouts section, you'll see there's a PDF there. That includes all the slides plus some additional notes of what we're going to be covering today. At the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session, but you are welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation, again, using the GoToWebinar interface. You'll see over there, there's a section that says questions. You can enter in your question, and then we have a team of people from Profound Logic who can answer those for you throughout the webinar. And then at the end of the presentation, we will try to address as many of those as possible. If we don't get to your question today, we will include a question and answer transcript with that email that I'll send out. And then at the end of the webinar, you will be prompted to take a survey. This lets us know how we did today, and it will also help us prepare for future webinars. Now with that, I'm going to hand things over to Scott.
Wow, thanks a lot, Amanda. Man, I'm so excited about this. We worked on this for a long time. I'm just telling you, we worked on this stuff for a long time, and it's just very exciting to be able to bring it to you. And maybe I shouldn't say being able to bring it to you, because it actually is available already. It's been available since May, but just being able to tell people about the things that we worked on that I think are really cool. So I'm very excited. What I'm going to show you today are just the highlights of this new release, Profound UI 6, which includes the new look and feel, the widget sets, which I think are going to be very useful to customers, the ability to design in multiple tabs in the Visual Designer. We now have the ability to browse and edit files in the IFS, which is going to be a real time saver. And then I'm going to hand things over to Matthew. And Matthew is going to tell you about our responsive design layout, which is one of the features that has been the most requested by customers. And then also our offline capabilities in the mobile app, so you can have apps that are actually not always connected to IBMI. But there are many more new features, so I don't want you to think that this is everything. This just, the highlights, if you will. There's a lot of stuff in this release. So with that, I'm going to pop right into the demo. I don't want to waste too much time on PowerPoint because I want to show you this good stuff. So I'm going to open up, this is my browser. And the first thing I wanted to tell you about is the new look and feel. You can see this is what the Visual Designer looks like now in version 6. And just for comparison, this is what the designer looked like before that in version 5 and actually all the previous versions. We haven't done a change to the way this looks since we released the product until now. So this is, the way it's basically looked since 2010. So we've taken this Visual Designer and we've redone it like this. You can see it's a very sort of clean look now. It's a much more modern, much more up to date with the times, and everything's very sort of clean, and the icons pop, and it looks really nice. And of course, it's not just the rich display Visual Designer, but also this is the universal display Visual Designer, which of course is very similar looking. It always has been, but all the same options you would expect are here, but you're using this new style. And we also did it in the Genie Administrator. So here is the Genie Administrator. And one of the things I want to emphasize about these changes is it doesn't change, your stuff. It's just a new look to what we have, at least as far as this new look that I'm talking about. So your Genie skin will still be here. All the options you're used to having on the skin will still be under here. You'll still be able to edit the files just like you always have, but we've got this new look and feel to make it look modern. And along those lines as well, in Atrium, if you've already got Atrium set up and installed, you'll see that it comes up looking exactly the same as it always has. And we do have the new look and feel in Atrium, but it is a little bit hidden. You have to actually go in and change your theme. And the new theme is called Steel. So if you change to the new theme, you'll get that new flat look and feel, that modern, clean look and feel that I've been talking about. And this is kind of a theme throughout, right? We don't want to, cause any problems with your existing applications. So we kept all that working the way it always has. So anything that's going to be seen by the end user, including, the Atrium screens, including the screens you built in the Visual Designer or in Genie, will look the way they always have. It's just a change to our tools. And of course, we did add some new stuff, right? So we added, like these widgets you see here on the left, which are beautiful widgets. But if you were to open, say this old screen that I built in the old Visual Designer, if I were to open that, you'll see that it still looks exactly the same. So that's, important, because your work, if you've built screens with our tools, are not going to change. You're not going to have to, worry about things getting upset. Okay, so new look and feel, which I think is really, really, really nice. Now, with that, the next thing I wanted to talk about is, in fact, these widget sets, which is probably the most obvious thing that's different about this Visual Designer besides just the look. So the widget sets over here is a new sort of way of organizing and dealing with your widgets. Now, the old way is still here. Again, if you've got existing screens, don't worry about it. You can still go under all widgets, and you still have all the same widgets you've always had. They still work the same way. But one of the problems with this thing, what we found customers struggle with a little bit, is when they're building screens, the widgets they want aren't necessarily together. So if they wanted a panel, they would have to go under here, under panels. And then you've got a list of lots of different panels. But of course, who's going to use all of these panels in one display, right? You're never going to do that. In fact, most customers will have like one panel styled the way that they like to use it, and one button styled the way that they like to use it. And all the other things, drop downs and all the different things you use when you build a screen. So that's what this widget sets feature is all about. The idea behind widget sets is we've got one of each widget that people commonly use, and it's styled to look, to look good with the other things. So if I scroll down to where we've got panels here, I could bring in a panel, and you'll see that it's got this particular widget set is called Blueprint, which is a blue theme. There's another one that we shipped called Office Copy. You can see at the bottom, and that's like a black theme. So it looks just like this except it's got black. But those are just the ones that we ship, and I'll show you in a minute how you can, even create your own. But just for an example here, I can put in a widget. I can give it some kind of a name. Maybe I'll just call this Scott's application as a simple example. And I'll make a hello world just like I did in the old designer. And I don't know, we'll make that maybe make that a bigger font and center it. Oops, I unclicked the center by mistake. So we've got that, but you notice how the font goes together with the color of the panel. So we've got things all kind of themed to go together here, and that's really what this widget sets idea is about. Because that's what we find customers do. Typically what you'll have is you'll have somebody who's kind of in charge of coming up with the theme for the company, and you'll make something like the company's color scheme, right? This is the way we want our panels to look. This is the way we want our buttons to look. And they'll sit down and design them all. And then you can actually do that here. This isn't just about the ones that we ship. If you click plus, you can create your own widget set. So let's say you work for Acme Incorporated, you might call your set, Acme Widgets. So we've got our widget set now called Acme, and notice it's blank because I just created it. But we can add widgets to this. So we can actually, fill this in with whatever we want. And these widgets that I've been using that are, styled with this blue look, these are not actually new widgets. They're the same widgets we've always had. They've just been styled in a particular way. And you can build your own styles and put them into your widget set. So for example, it's just kind of a simple example here. Let's say that you've got a button that you use in a lot of applications. For example, adding a new record, very common thing in business programming. You're adding something like a new invoice or a new customer number or something. So it's very common to have like an add new record type of button in an application. So I thought green would be nice for that. Green kind of symbolizes go. I thought that fit with add. So I've changed the wording on it to say add. I can also change the icon. I like, there's one that's like a circle. Here it is right here with a circle with a plus in it. I think works really well for an add button. So the idea here is you can go and you can style it however you want. And I'm just doing a simple example, but you can change any of the details of this widget to style it however you want. And then you can right click it and choose add to set down here. So when I click add to set, I'll actually be able to add it to one of these widget sets. In fact, I'll add it to this Acme one that I just created. And so if we go to that set, you'll see that that's now in here. Now it didn't know what to call it. It didn't know that it was called an add button, and it didn't know what to use for an icon for it in the widget sets. But that's very easy to set. We can just right click on it and choose rename. And we'll call this our add record button or something like that. So we'll say add record button. And now it says that over there. And to change the icon, it's the same thing. Now the icon can be any image that you want or anything that can be displayed in a web browser. So a JPEG, a PNG, a GIF. So you just have to have that in your IFS and point to it. To keep things simple, I'm actually just going to use the same one that we used in the blueprint set. So I'm just going to go and find that. These are all the icons from the blueprint set. I just happen to be in that directory already. And so here's the one that was used for the green button, and I'll just select that, and you'll see now I have that that icon in there. But you can use anything you want. You just copy it to your IFS, and then you can point to it. So it's really easy to add your own widgets in there. And again, the idea here is that someone is going to take and design a set of widgets that you want to use. So maybe you want to have an exit button. Just another example, right? Just another quick example. You could do like an exit button, and maybe you like that X for exit on there, but you want it to say exit instead, and you don't want to have to change that wording every single time. You want to be able to keep it consistent. You can do that by just changing it and then adding it to the set and adding it to the Acme widget set or whatever you decide to call your set. All right, so I think you probably get the idea. I'll just call this one exit button. I'm not going to take the time to set the icon and everything. I think you got the idea. The other thing we can do is we've got these tools up here at the top, so we can remove a widget set. I'm not going to do that, but you can rename the widget set, but you can move it around as well. So one of the things you're going to want to do is put your widget set at the top. So we'll move this Acme widget set up just by having it selected and hitting the arrows. You can move it down as well. So we've got all those things, and then once you've got it all set up, this has been done on my PC so far. So everything I've done has only affected me. But if I wanted to make this company-wide, what I would do is upload it to the IBMI. And that's what these buttons are for. So there's one here to upload it or save it to the server. I click that. You won't see anything when I click it. It just kind of blinks for a second. But that's what it did. It saved it to a file on the server. And then people on their PCs can go and they can click this button to download it. And again, if I click that, you won't really see anything. It asks if you want to replace what you have, and then because I just saved it, it'll be exactly the same as what I had. But other people who don't have the things you've just created can go here and download it, and then they'll have all your widgets on their desktops as well. And then everybody can be building with kind of the consistent widgets. So I think that's a really nice feature. Once that's all set up, that can save you a lot of time because you won't have to go through and and reset up each of these widgets every time you build a new screen. All right, so the next thing I wanted to tell you about is this multiple tab feature in the Visual Designer. And if you've been observant, you might have noticed that I've actually already been using multiple tabs. Remember earlier I opened up that older screen that I made in the old Visual Designer to show you that it hadn't changed? Well, it's actually still open here in another tab. And in fact, every time I do open a screen or I do create a blank screen, it will open a new tab. So for example, if I clicked new here and said I want a new display file, it opened another tab called unnamed screen, and I still got the old ones open here in tabs. Likewise, if I open something, maybe I'll open one of our demo applications just to show you. If I open another display, you'll see that opened in another tab. So we've got things in tabs here. And the tabs also close independently of one another. So you'll notice there's an X in the corner there when you mouse over it, and I can close any of these tabs that I don't want to open. All right, so this new tabs thing is another time saver. We can have multiple things open at once. So this is a really powerful thing. Another thing that I wanted to tell you about is this ability to browse IFS files. So one of the challenges that we've found with customers, especially when they're first getting set up, and so we see this a lot, especially when we go in to do like the initial training of customers, they struggle to find ways to make changes to files in the IFS. And it's common with this stuff because it is web programming that you'll need to be able to download things like CSS files that style your application, or JavaScript files that you use to do special logic in your applications. But what people will do, of course, is map a drive to the IFS. They'll install some PC software maybe that makes it nice to edit these things. But people sometimes struggle to get that set up. So we thought we would make this really easy. So that's what this Files tab you see over here is. This is allowing me now to browse my IFS, and it actually browses the web server instance that I'm in. I called my web server SK Webinar because it's my initials followed by webinar, because it was for this webinar. But these are the IFS directories, and I can go into them, and I can see the files that are in there, and I can actually make changes to them. So, for example, it's very common to store JavaScript under this user data custom JS directory, and I've got a couple files in there, and when I double click them, they open up in an editor over here. So I'm able to, and again, they're opening in tabs, so just like everything else, it's in tabs. So I'm actually able to do my editing right in here. And in fact, you might notice that this is colorized. I'm sure you saw that right away, right? So it's colorizing this JavaScript, for certain sort of common web type files. It actually knows how to syntax check them and colorize them, making this a pretty nice editor to do your work in. And so just to show you an example of that, if I were to deliberately insert something invalid, like you can't put an exclamation point character there, you'll notice that it's put this red X over here to tell me, and if I mouse over that, it'll tell me what the error is and stuff like that. So this is really nice for editing JavaScript code, and it does not require you to do any special setup, right? You don't have to set up drive mapping or anything like that, because it's all right here in the Visual Designer. You just, as long as the Visual Designer itself is installed, of course, you can just go in and make changes. So, I can make whatever change that I want. Like I could type that character there, and then I can use the same save buttons that you normally would use for your display files as well. So I can hit save. Oh, I actually probably didn't want to save that since it was an obvious error, but of course I can just erase it and save it again. So we've got a really nice tool here as just an add-on. You think about this, it's just an add-on. That it was designed to do things like do this Visual Designer work, but we've got the really nice sort of add-on tool here to allow you to do editing of things like JavaScript and CSS right here. And in fact, any kind of text file pretty much you can edit in the IFS very sort of quickly and easily through the Visual Designer. So that's a really powerful feature. All right, so that's what I had to show you. I'm going to turn things over to Matthew, and Matthew's going to show you our responsive design and mobile stuff.
All right, thanks, Scott. So I'm going to give you a little background. We're going to be talking about responsive design and the tools that Profound has for handling responsive design now in Profound UI version 6. So we'll go over a little background of responsive design first. So what I have here, just a plain web page, a form that was designed for a browser, and I've got a browser window up here. There's a tool, I want to look at this and see how it looks on a mobile device, because when you look at pages, sometimes they aren't designed well for different devices. So I pulled up my developer tools. You may not be familiar with this, but all the browsers have these sort of tools that let you tweak things and investigate things on the page. And this particular one gives me a little tool here where I can pretend like I'm looking at the page from an iPhone. So as you can see, it's hard to read because the text is so small. And you may have come across pages like this in your browsing of the internet on your devices before, where when you first load the page, just everything is really small. And in order to read anything on the page, you have to zoom in. And then maybe, like if you're reading an article, you have to scroll right and then down, and you sort of zigzag across the page, or maybe you give up because that's too cumbersome and you don't read the article. Or if there's a form, you say like, oh, this is really hard to do on the mobile device, so you just don't even bother with it. And it's hard to do because the user is not accustomed to scrolling left and right. We've all come to expect that when there is content that you can't see, you just want to scroll up and down, not left and right, because left and right is a little too much. You can get lost. So in this form, you can see you may have even forgotten that there are extra fields. So if you try to fill out the form, you hit accept, there may be some errors over on these fields you don't even see. So it's just a really bad experience for the user's perspective on a mobile device. So the way that people have handled this in the past is when the phones first came out. Most people were on browsers, but the phones came out and sites were designed once for the desktop. So it looks great here on the desktop, and then maybe they would design the site again for just a mobile device. But as more and more device types came out and all sorts of different sizes came available, you can see in just this list here, there are about 10 different sizes. And so that approach is not going to work. It is not practical to just redesign everything for every single device. So one thing that you can do to solve that problem is to design a responsive site. So I'm going to pull up the same sort of form in a different design. So what I've got going on here, so I'm in sort of my desktop view. If I resize my browser window, you can see that things are shrinking and the positions are changing. It makes it look like everything's together. So that is a page that is responsive. It responds to the different device size changes. And if I go to a phone and I rotate it, you can see that all the fields are in view. You can read them, except it has some limitations. So you can see that these fields here, they're cut off. In this view, everything's not completely in the view still. If I have the browser window, of course you can see everything, but I don't think this looks as good as the other screen because it's all spread out. And if you saw the webinar last year that Brian May did, it was a great webinar about responsive design. And one of the ways that he addressed responsiveness, first he showed you how to do a page like this, which is to use our existing tools in Profound UI. This is that screen in Visual Designer. So I have these fields, I've just set them up with percentages, so lefts and tops, and that's how you can do partially responsive design. And you can, maybe that would pass for you, but it has limitations. So the truly modern responsive way to handle things, I'm going to show you a third screen, is to not just have things resized proportionally, but to have the layout actually change. You can see that the fields shifted. Instead of being across from each other, now they're stacked on top of each other because there wasn't enough room. So now they shifted around so that they would fit on the page. And even if I get smaller, they've shifted again. So if I pick different device sizes, this page will just work for whichever device size. So I've got landscape versus portrait, or if I use the desktop, it will just work. So that's the truly modern responsive way to handle things. And how do you do things this way? Well, if you saw the webinar last year, or if you're just aware of responsiveness, you may have heard of Bootstrap. And what Bootstrap is in a framework that handles responsiveness. It uses JavaScript and CSS to do these sorts of things. There are also several other frameworks that can do the same thing. And they all handle things their own way. There's sort of a learning curve to each one, but they all require different external JavaScript files and CSS to get things to work. So that may not be desirable for you because you may not want to download a whole bunch of extra JavaScript files, and you may not want to take the time, maybe you don't have a lot of time to learn how to do things the Bootstrap or the jQuery or whatever way. So it would be nice if you could just do things if there were an easier way. So the browser makers all decided, yes, there should be an easier way. We shouldn't have, responsiveness is important. We shouldn't have to have everyone just download frameworks to be able to accomplish responsiveness. So what they did, I'm going to pull up my developer tools and inspect this page. So what the browser makers all decided was, hey, why don't we use some CSS rules, add some new features in CSS to be able to do the responsiveness, and we'll all put it built into our browsers, and nobody will have to download anything extra. It will just work out of the box with the browser. So if you don't know what CSS is, those are the rules that handle the layouts of the web page, the styles of the web page, and they just say how the page is supposed to look. And with these new rules, I'm looking at some here. These are specifically for responsiveness, so not just like the font colors and sizes, but it's the actual layout, and it can change depending on the device size that you have going, that you're viewing the page with. So the standard that they all adopted, it's called CSS grid layout, and what's unusual about this is that all the makers decided to release this at the same time in March of 2017. Usually when there's a feature, one like Chrome will adopt one, and then Firefox will say, hey, that's a pretty good idea, we'll do that too. But this one was such an important feature, they all adopted it at the same time, all the modern browsers. So that's what's going on here on this page. And I'm going to pull it up in Visual Designer. And this is the design of the page that had that. And what I have going on here is our new responsive layout widget. So this is just a layout, which if you've used them before or not, they're just widgets that let you have containers, and you can put different things inside of them. They work for rich display files. And in this particular one, you can set up however many item containers you want, and then you set the rules will decide the dimensions and the positions of all of these containers. So in that standard CSS is what's in this property here, and that's what defines this. And I've actually got it copied over and formatted in a text editor. So let's look at these rules really quick. So this is going to be a little intimidating. Don't worry. So there are 14 different containers and 3 different screen sizes. That's a lot of different rules. I'm sure you're thinking, hey, I don't have time to learn like CSS if I don't already know it. And let's say I already know CSS. Am I going to have to take the time to learn all these different rules? And if I want to change something, this looks really complicated. How am I going to just maintain my screens if I want to change a simple thing? Well, we agree. You shouldn't have to learn all those rules to be able to handle to change things in a responsive layout. So what we've got going on, let's say I want to click on this little ellipses here, or just double click on the layout itself. I've got an editor for those rules. So what's great is you can change any of the rules using your mouse. You don't have to even know what the rules are. You don't have to understand them. You can design your screen just using the mouse. So this editor is just a representation of all the containers, all the sections in that layout. So my particular layout, it's spanning the entire screen. So this first section, since this spans the entire layout, this is spanning the entire screen. And this would have been the first name label. And then I've got all my other widgets inside of these other fields. If I want to make this one a little bit wider, I can shift things around just by dragging. And I can change like row sizes, and I can do all sorts of different things with the mouse. So I've designed it once for a layout for the big screen, and if I want to do things differently for a small screen, I can click over here, and then I'll see In this case, I've already set up the rules for the small screen. Let's say I want this one to be bigger, I'll just make it bigger. So that's the title. That was, again, the first name label. So you can do things with the mouse. Don't have to learn any of these CSS rules. And that's a great way to handle responsiveness. If you need to tweak something, it might be a little bit easier. The rules are there. You can maybe change the pixel value of one of them. Say like you're having a hard time using your mouse to get it from 49 to 50, you can just change the text in there. And then it updates over here. You click save and things are different. So we feel that that's a great way. It'll handle responsiveness. And now I'm going to move on to the next portion. I'm going to talk about our mobile app and the changes that we have for it. So right now I'm logging into my phone, and I'm going to share the screen of my phone with you. There we go. Okay, so just have a regular iPhone here, and I'm going to pull up the Profound UI mobile app. So if you haven't used this before, the first thing you'll see, you can define some connections, and then once those connections are defined, then they're listed here. So I'm going to click on the right arrow. These connections are meant to point to your IBMI and your instance of Profound UI. You can specify some parameters to tell whichever program handles the mobile client. Maybe put one parameter that says this connection goes to program A, or a different parameter says this other connection goes to program B, and so on. So you can have all sorts of different it looks like you have different programs here in your app when you set up all those different connections. And then there's another, this is new here, this switch, this offline mode, and we'll talk about that here in a second. First, I want to just briefly go over how the old connections worked. So the first one is the old style. When I connect to it, it's connected to the IBMI, and what it does, it much like the browser does when you connect to your Profound UI sessions, in that it fetches like one screen at a time. When you submit something on this, I've clicked on something, it's talked to the server has responded with a new screen, so all the logic and user interface are stored on the server, and the mobile app just sort of talks to the server the user interacts with this app, but all the logic and everything is on the server. So that works great as long as you have a good connection to your IBMI. So, but as you know, with mobile connections, sometimes you don't always have a solid connection because you may be going through an area where your cell service is dropped, or you're switching between networks, or maybe you have no service at all and you can't connect. So if, depending on your application, that can be a big problem. Like maybe you have users where they absolutely must log some data in. Well, if they can't even connect, they can't log data, or if the connection is dropped, maybe their data gets lost. And if that's a problem, then this original connection style is not going to work if you must guarantee. So I've clicked on this second connection, and you can see this new switch here is switched on, and because that switch is on, there's a new icon here. So that signals that this is an offline type of connection. So the way these new offline connections work, the logic is stored on the app. So first you got to synchronize. You click on this little the synchronize button. That's what that means. What happened was that this talked to a web service on the IBMI, which responded with some JavaScript and a rich display file, or a set of JavaScript and rich display files. Basically, the user interface and all the program logic got downloaded to the app. So now that's all. Once it's synchronized, it's stored on the app. The web service also downloaded, it may have downloaded some data. So I'm going to click on that. I'm not actually connected to an IBMI now. I've just got an application running within the mobile app. So it's like an app within an app going on right now. So this is a really simple app, and I'm going to demonstrate to you that it's not actually talking to the IBMI. So we got the logic here in the app. I'm going to move over to my browser. I have a view pulled up where I've got some data that will eventually get written to the IBMI. So this is just a view of a file on the IBM. The last order is 79 from earlier today. So with this app, we'll see that the checkout, once I click checkout, we're back here. So that app in particular, it just exits, and let's take a look at our view. Did it actually talk to the IBMI? Things are still the same. So where is that data? Let's click, is it lost? Let's look back in the device. You can see that the information is still there. So that's good. The data is stored on the app until the user clicks the synchronize button. So we're going to click synchronize now. It's going to talk to a web service, the same web service that handles the synchronizing. And what that particular web service we've set it up to do is to write to this file. You can see there's an order number 80. So that web service could be Profound.js or Universal Display File or any CGI program that can handle HTTP requests. But the logic happens here on the app. It's all JavaScript, and so you can imagine that there are different capabilities that you can add to your apps. Like maybe it's okay if some data is lost, or sometimes people can't connect to the server. But for times that people absolutely must enter data, and you must guarantee that the data isn't lost, if there's a likelihood of the connection being dropped, you can add a new connection for offline mobile. So we hope that helps a lot. I'm going to turn the time over to Scott now.
All right, thanks. Give me a second here to switch back over to my screen. So a few last minute things to let you know what the next step would be. So if you're not already a Profound customer, the way that you can get started with this is you can download a 30-day trial of the products. We do offer a trial, and we'll be happy to help you get started with that. But the starting point for that is to go to info.profoundlogic.com/profoundui-trial, and there you can sign up and download a 30-day trial and try it all out for yourself. You know, kick the tires and make sure it all works the way you'd want it to work. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar, and so, you know, watch your email for that. I do ask for a little bit of patience here. It does take us a little while to get the recording together and all the materials together. So it does take a few days, but we will be, you know, watch your email. We will be sending that out, and everyone will be able to go in and, you know, watch this again if they like, show it to your friends, whatever you like to do. When you exit the webinar today, you will be prompted to answer a survey, and that does help us out a lot. So if you wouldn't mind taking the time to fill out that survey, we would certainly appreciate it. And then one last thing I do want to remind you about is on the right-hand side of your screens where you look at the GoToWebinar controls, there is an option to download the slides from this talk. So we've got the slides with additional notes that we added about the different features. If you want something like that, we've got it there as a PDF. You can just click on it to download it. All right. So at this point, I would like to open this up to any questions. And again, you can use that questions area in GoToWebinar, and you can type your questions. We've had some from the beginning here, so we can go ahead and answer those for you. One of the questions was about browsing the IFS. The question was, can I browse other areas besides the www folder? At this point in time, we've not set it up to do that. That's something we could certainly look into if you want to put it in as a feature request. But for now, yeah, it goes under your web instance. If your designer is installed in www/profoundui, then that is, that's the only area right now that you can get from that designer. But again, we could look into expanding that if that's of interest. Let's see if we can find another question here. Or Matt, if you see any questions that you'd like to answer, go ahead and jump in. See, for the offline connection feature, does it retrieve information from the server when it's online and loads that information when it's offline? And yes, that's exactly how it's designed to work. And that synchronize button is meant to allow you to synchronize, your data. So yeah, you can be disconnected and it'll work, and then the synchronize button will connect it and send it up to the server. So you will in fact have the ability to synchronize it back to the server. You won't just lose that data. Is it possible to copy a format from a display file to another display file? Yeah, absolutely. And we've always actually had that capability. If you go into your record formats area of the Visual Designer, above the record formats, there are copy and paste buttons. So you can highlight your record format and choose copy, and then you can go to another, either another tab in the designer now that we have the tab features, and you can paste your record format in there, or even if you have another window open, as long as it's in the same browser, if you have another window open, you can paste it in there as well. So that's certainly available. Is there a way for an admin to preload widget sets for users so they don't have to download through their portal? So the problem we have with that approach is what happens if a user has made some customizations to their widget sets on their machine. We wouldn't want to just automatically wipe those out. So if they're coming in for the first time into the Visual Designer, that's exactly what it'll do. It'll download what you've got set up on the IBMI. But if they have widget sets already set up on their device, then it will not download them until they click the download button. But yes, those are stored on the IBMI and can be downloaded. So you don't have to, certainly don't have to set them up again. They are actually in a text file, a JSON file specifically in the IFS. Matthew, can you answer some of these questions about the responsive ones?
Yeah, I'm looking at the one about the grid actually right now. So normally what you do with a grid, since this is a layout, you just put the grid inside of a layout, and I'm not sure how well it would work if you had like tons of columns. You might have to have a layout inside of a layout with scroll set, or you may not even have to do that. You could just set for one of these responsive sections, you could just edit the rules manually and set your overflow to X to scroll. I think it's scroll, and that should that might work. I'm not sure I've tried that before though. Is that the one you were talking about?
Yeah, that was one of them. I want to say that there were some other ones as well. Or maybe I'm thinking of, there's some questions about some of the mobile stuff as well.
Yeah, I might have to experiment with that and respond back later, but I would first put the expand to layout property of the grid true and see if that works, and then maybe do the overflow.
Okay. Another question is, how can you control so that only some developers have the right to upload widget sets? So what you do to do that is again, there's a file where this is stored in the IFS. So all you have to do is adjust the permissions on that file, adjust the authorities so that only certain people have authority to overwrite it. So it's just a regular file, IFS file, that you can set up the authorities however you like. Modifying personalized widgets, is it possible to port the change to all of, he said video, I think he means all the screens created from it. That's actually not how it works. The widget sets are for, you know, what happens when you drag things onto the display. So it won't actually change existing screens. And if you think about it, you probably don't want it to change existing screens, at least not automatically. You know, think about that. You know, some developer makes a change for his one screen and suddenly all the screens change. That probably, you know, wouldn't be good. You'd want to test them all. But what you can do if you want to be able to change all the screens at once is you can use CSS classes to style your widgets. And if you change the CSS class, that will actually apply to everything. So it's a different approach. But that is how I would approach it if you wanted to have a way to like change the whole look and feel at once. All right, Matthew, do you have some more that you'd like to do?
Let's see. I was actually still looking at that other one. I can demonstrate do we want to share, or I can just show it later how to do this. Maybe it'd be easier if I demonstrated it, how to set that overflow on this widget.
Okay.
Let me change my resolution back. Oops. Hang on just a second.
All right, 1 second. He'll set that up so that he can show you how to do that. This question he's asking about was related to managing the overflow of fields on the grid when reducing the size of the screen.
Yes. So never mind the expand to layout. I turned that off. So if I've got a new layout here, responsive layout. If I double click to edit it, and I've got the style rules opened up. If you drag like any, well, that's the row gap. So I click on this section and I drag and just don't change it, then that rule is just going to show up here. So that is now the rule selected. This is the section selected. What I did was I just added this. So I just clicked here. I click add a new property, and I'm actually just manually going to type it in. So right now we don't. This is the way to do it right now. So I just type scroll, hit enter, and now you see the scroll bar is there, and now the scroll bar is here. So if you have a number of different columns, you can scroll to the right. So that's a little complicated, but that's one way you can do it. So I think hopefully that answers your question. If not, send us an email.
So there's another question here about how to position the fields in the responsive layout. He said, you know, is it in percentages or pixels or M's or what? What would you use for that, and what would you use for fonts, for sizing fonts?
Well, with fonts, you could just do things the way you normally do. You could just do pixels. I don't think that it'll inherit anything from the widget itself. Like once it's inside the widget, it's going to use absolute positioning. You can use percentages if you want. Like if you do 100%, it's going to do 100% of whatever the container it is. Just it works the same as with other layout widgets, which is that like each container is sort of like, it's just a container. So does that answer it? I'm not sure about the fonts, like how you just use whatever you normally use with fonts. None of these containers, like I don't think you can inherit anything from them. Like they don't use, well, they have their own special type of units. Let me erase that rule because that scroll bar is ugly. So I'm gonna add a row. Okay, so You have pixel units for defining the layouts themselves. You also have percentage units, and then there's also this fractional unit, and that's a new type of unit. But all of those are just specific to the CSS grid layout rules here, and they don't really apply to anything else like fonts or positions of things inside, like the containers. Yeah, so
Okay.
you just drag them.
So one of the other questions then is, apart from enhancing the display and user interface, are there other benefits going for this version of Profound UI? With all versions of Profound UI, one of the things that you'll always get is the latest bug fixes. So we've done a lot of work, of course, fixing up the issues that have been noticed. As well as, there's just a lot of sort of small enhancements here and there, like, maybe adding a new property somewhere, or, adjusting the way something works to fix a problem with it. So there's a lot of changes. We actually do have excuse me, we have a what's new page that you can go to, and you can always see all of the changes that are made. There's a lot of them, but remember, this is a tool for making displays. So of course, the bulk of it is about user interface and displays.
And if I can jump in real quick, this is Amanda. If you go to our website, profoundlogic.com, if you look under the tabs at the top, I believe it's under resources, there's a link that goes to product documentation. That's where you will find all the latest additions to our product, any new enhancements, any bug fixes. So if you have a problem finding that, just send us an email and we'll send you a link to that. But that'll give you an update on all of the new features and fixes that we've added to each release. Yep, there it is.
Thank you. So I think we're done for now.
Yep, I think we've answered a lot of questions, but for those that, again, that we weren't able to get to in this presentation, we will send you a transcript with all of those answers after the webinar. I just want to take a minute to thank Scott and Matt for a great presentation. I hope this is really useful for everybody who is attending. And just remember, the on-demand webinar will be available soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And we hope to see you at our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.